Hey guys, Enter the Stars. Good morning. Thanks for coming to the show. I love these morning shows because, fresh after a cup of coffee and mornings are like my spiritual time with God, be able to commune with Him. It's usually a lot of the times when the Holy Spirit drops some really cool truth, oftentimes becomes the subject matter for the day's videos and shows. So this is no different. This is actually what we're going to talk about today are targeted individuals. Now, and if you don't know what a targeted individual is, let me explain it to you. And as soon as I explain it to you, we're going to get into a very troubling trend and a very troubling practice that happens here in the United States. And I'm not sure about if this happens across the world. Actually, I am. We do have some evidence of this newborn screening that occurs that happens in other parts of the world. But before we get into this, we're going to talk about what is a targeted individual. Now, I've had friends, some of you actually here on YouTube, that I've had a chance to kind of sit down and talk with in great detail about what a targeted individual is and different people's experience. We had Christine McMartin live on the show. Her daughter was actually on the Dr. Phil show. And I think to a certain degree, she became a targeted individual when she was speaking out against Oprah, which she believes led to her daughter's invitation onto the Dr. Phil show. And this is real, you guys. This stuff really happens when we speak out. And absolutely, some of us are born into being targeted individuals. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate to you guys today. Now, before I get into that, I'm going to share with you my personal experience that could prove or could allude to me being a targeted individual myself. Now, if I wasn't awake in truth, these synchronicities that I'm going to share with you probably will just go right over most people's heads and could be seen as pure coincidence. But when you begin to understand how they are databasing all of our DNA from the time of birth, and that people have recognized this and understand that this is happening, then the puzzle pieces could possibly start falling into place. Now, as many of you guys know, I grew up in the Jehovah's Witness religion, which is very structured. Masonic principles, even the founder has a pyramid with all-seeing eye at his gravesite. Of course, I'm no longer a Jehovah's Witness, but my experience with that taught me that there are eyes everywhere. Okay, there are eyes everywhere. And then you begin to wonder, like your life path, like what happened in your life, the people you married, the people you dated. My first wife, as you guys know, was born on the 333rd day of the year with 33 left. My second wife was born on 9/11. Now, during those years of my life, I had no idea who these people were. I was not awake. But now, looking in hindsight, there seems to be some kind of spiritual activity, some kind of level of spiritual activity. And the hard part is differentiating the dark side from the light side. Okay, that is the challenge. Let me give you guys some shout outs before we continue on. I see K Small in there in the mod seat. Thanks, K. There's Clyde Byrne, John Smith, Carrie O'Neill. Yeah, once they get their eyes on you, Carrie, it's very difficult, especially if you open the door and start talking to them. So I guess man, if my mom heard me right now, I'd be in big trouble. Yeah, so that's the story going on with that. There's USN Gray Ghost, always a hope. So let's continue on with this target individual topic, because I'm going to show you some stuff. Now, before I get into this, there is a scripture in the Bible that talks about the enmity between the two seeds. I've told you guys this. Let's actually look it up so I can show you what I'm talking about. This goes all the way back to the book of Genesis. This is what laid the foundation for the rest of Earth's history. The nature of the conflict between good and evil. The nature of the conflict between the two seeds. What are the two seeds? The two seeds, basically the pure seed, those of us born through the Adamic bloodline, we don't know who these people are. Basically born through the Adamic bloodline, unmixed. And then we have the serpent seed bloodline. Okay, now this is mentioned all the way back in Genesis 3:15. And this was actually mentioned just after creation, just after the fall of man. So God was establishing that there would be an enmity between the two seeds. This was not some far-flung prophecy for the future. It was happening at the time God spoke these words. This is what he was talking about, the serpent seed. What does this have to do with being a targeted individual? Well, which seed are you? What blood do you carry through your veins? What does that mean if you have certain blood going through your veins? Are you going to be gifted in certain areas? Well, let's look at what the elite do. The elite actually intermarry within their bloodlines to keep their gifting strong and all of their attributes of the fallen ones. Okay. And so if that's the case, those of us of the pure bloodlines, we might have spiritual gifting for the light side, you see. Now here's what I'm talking about here. It says here, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. This is all the way back. It's because the serpent has done this. What did the serpent do that had to do with two different seeds? That is the question. This is called critical thinking. Okay. What did the serpent do that had to do with different seeds? Okay. Now here's the deal. He shall bruise you in the head, and you shall bruise him in the heel. Now, what we've been taught, which I believe is true to a certain degree, is that the serpent would receive the fatal wound to the head, and that the woman would receive the unfatal wound to the heel of her foot. Okay, but this goes deeper, and this is where God's amazing. What we're looking at here, the serpent eating the dust, this is also basically, I think, pointing to the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, bruising itself in the heel. Except the Ouroboros does not account for the woman representing God's holy seed, right? Unfettered, because she was created out of Adam. Now, it goes even deeper to another level, because when Jesus says, kick off the dust off of your feet and go to the next town if someone does not feed you, I believe that even points back to this, basically kicking off the sinful dust of the serpent. But we can even take this to another level, because when newborns are screened genetically, they actually are pricked in the heel. And now with everything I just said, does it make sense as to why? Now we're going to get into this. This is unbelievable, because there is a big controversy regarding postnatal screening or infant screening. And this is what has been said about newborn screening. This is not something that everyone accepts. There have been controversies. This is the history of it. Newborn screening tests have been a subject of political controversy in the last decade. Now, what is newborn screening? Well, it came out in the 1960s. Let's read a little bit of the history of this before we get into the controversy. It says here, screening infants shortly after birth for a list of conditions that are treatable but not clinically evident in the newborn period. Some of the conditions, including newborn screening programs, are only detectable after irreversible damage has been done. So they do this heel prick. They blot it on this card, which is called the Guthrie card. and they screen for diseases. Sounds okay, doesn't it? We're helping to save lives, and this is how they market this. We're saving lives, right? But here's the problem, and here's the controversy. And this is what sent chills up my spine, because I found 3 or 4 instances of people objecting to this, and I'm going to show you why. They're actually databasing and logging all of your genetic information from the time you're born into this world. And in fact, you are born into sin. You are born into it. You're born into the system of control. It says here in 2003, 2 California babies. Let's see. Wait. Let's get down here. Let's see here. That's not the controversy I wanted to talk about. Actually, another part down here. It says here, instituting MS screening often requires a sizable upfront expenditure. When states choose to run their own programs, the initial costs for equipment, training, and new staff can be significant. Moreover, MS gives only the screening result, not the confirmatory result. But for many states, screening is an integrated part of the Department of Health, which cannot or will not be easily replaced. So they're talking about cost. Expanded newborn screening is also opposed among some healthcare providers who are concerned that effective follow-up and treatment may not be available. Controversy, okay, here's the part, has also erupted in some countries over collection and storage of blood or DNA samples by government agencies during the routine newborn blood screen. It was revealed, this is important, you guys, that in Texas, the state had collected and stored blood and DNA samples on millions of newborns without the parents' knowledge or consent. These samples were then used by the state for genetic experiments and to set up a database to catalog all of the samples' newborns. Talk about creepy. Samples obtained without parents' consent were destroyed. This is real, you guys. This is as serious as a heart attack. Your rights are taken away from the moment you're born. They know who you are. They know your bloodline. They know how much of the Christ seed that you have within you. They already know. So does it make sense that some people would be targeted individuals? Now, this is the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act. This was passed by Bush just before Obama came into power. Again, sounds Pollyanna, sounds great. Newborns' lives are saved from conditions that were missed in the prenatal screening. And now on the postnatal screening, newborn screening, they were found and babies were saved. But this, they never give anything away without taking something back. This says, while this legislation has received strong support from the medical community and patient advocacy groups, there has been continued opposition to its mandates. Sound familiar? This is why they want electronic medical records, you guys. They want all the stuff in a database so they can find you. Let's continue reading because this is chilling. Most notably, the Citizens Council on Health Freedom strongly opposed the passage of this act over privacy concerns. Twyla Brace, the president of the Minnesota-based activist group, bless her heart for standing up for something in this life, which most people fail to do, voiced concerns over the storage of blood spots and is a strong proponent of having all biobanks destroyed. They're called biobanks. So there are places in this country that have your most personal genetic information from the time you're born. This has been going on since the 1960s, you guys. Bray cited concerns over government-sponsored genetic research. It is worth noting that states have been storing samples since the 1960s when NBS was first implemented, and each state had its own policies on DBS storage and research. As of 2008, California has stored over 12,000 samples since 1980. Whose samples are they keeping? in California? I'd like to know. Why are they only keeping 12,000 samples and not everyone's samples? Who are these 12,000 children? Are these the targeted individuals that they hit you at certain key points of your life and insert people that steer you off track from your God-given destiny to make a change in this world? Is that what this is about? I'd like to know. Check in the chat. Make sure you guys are okay. Very disturbing, Mr. Anderson. I was disturbed when I dug deeper into this. Now, I'd done a video probably 2 years ago on this, and they didn't have all this information about the opposition. This is new. And so now I'm seeing that other people have the same concerns we do. Now, it says as of 2008, California stored up to 12,000 samples since 1980, while Texas destroys a sample within months. Okay, so apparently Texas learned its lesson, right? Privacy advocacy groups voice concerns on the potential abuse of these samples in both medical and forensic uses. Forensic. Some even cited the sharing of genetic information with the Department of Homeland Security. Homeland Security is looking at infant genetic information. If anyone has issues with the information that I'm putting forward, I know people like to try to discredit Wikipedia, completely ignoring that most of this stuff is footnoted. You can simply copy and do searches of key statements in Google and find the source. So Wikipedia doesn't tell lies. It simply is a database of sources. And if you can find the source that they're quoting, that is where you'll find the truth. Okay? So don't buy into Wikipedia is full of lies, because that's just a cop-out. Because they know channels like mine use Wikipedia, and that's their way to try to discredit this channel. It's all based on the sources. It says, however, past practices and clear policies on use and limitations indicate that there is a distinct separation between medical and forensic use. State laboratories have been known to turn down requests from law enforcement to access NBS data and samples, even in cases for identifying missing children. So here they're trying to make you feel better. Oh, it's safe at the laboratories. We don't share it, even from law enforcement. Well, if the Department of Homeland Security walks in and Obama wants to know my bloodline, for instance, because I speak out against him, do you think they really think they're going to turn down the President of the United States? I don't think so. What else do we have on prenatal screening and the keeping and using of our information for genetic testing and experiments? Well, same thing's going on in Ireland. Controversy emerged in 2012, whereby a number of hospitals retained heel prick test cards and therefore a DNA database with over 1 million samples from 1984 without consent or notification of the parents. This resulted in a 10-year rolling destruction cycle being introduced. So they keep it for 10 years. But I got news for you. They don't need to keep the information. It's digital. It's being stored somewhere. Just because they destroyed it doesn't mean it's gone. The infraction on your privacy occurred when they took your blood and kept the information. That's where the infraction on your privacy occurred, before you had a chance to say no. You see, similar practices exist in the United Kingdom, my brothers and sisters out there in the UK, New Zealand, and several states of the United States. This is real, you guys. I just showed you 3 different sources. So here's a little bit of the history of newborn screening. Let's blow this up a little bit. Newborn screening is recognized internationally as essential preventive public health program for early identification of disorders in newborns that can affect their long-term health. See how they throw you a bone? Early detection and diagnosis and treatment of certain genetic, metabolic, and infectious congenital disorders can lead to significant reductions of death, disease, and associated disabilities. Anyone who was reading this would be like, oh, God bless our country for saving the children, right? Newborn screening in the U.S. began with the work of Dr. Robert Guthrie, who in the 1960s developed a screening test for phenylketonuria. And I'd like to know who this individual is, because he probably made millions inventing this test that every single child in the United States takes. Millions, if not billions. This man is filthy rich. He also introduced a system for collection and transportation of blood samples on filter paper. Cost-effective, wide-scale genetic screening became possible. Okay. Current status and scope. So this goes on. I don't even know why I pulled this slide up. Just wanted to show you guys how they like to do this. So, all right, back in the chat. Let's do a Q&A with you guys. Now, this isn't meant to cause fear. This is the truth, you guys. What we do with it is what we do with it. I think this gives some validity to people who are feeling targeted, feel like nothing in their life ever goes right. There's always some kind of roadblock, that maybe even they're being followed. Some people have even suggested to me that there's a possibility that they might introduce people in your life to try to breed with you. I don't know if any of you had any personal experience with that. You have to understand this stuff is going on a very spiritual level. Okay. Okay. I'm reading in the chat here. Yeah, pretty wild, right, Trisha? I know, it's unbelievable. See, Liam, Chilton, Mindy is in the house. Method Marine, good morning. Paul Pan is modding for us. Sister C, Sunrise Skywatcher. Thanks for joining us, you guys. So we will get to the bottom of this. We will keep track of this. Any other upcoming controversies that occur with this genetic testing? Vets already have their DNA along with active duty. Interesting, X-ray 22. All right. Whitney had her husband follow the baby around once he left the delivery room. Good call. Okay, Small could have used her cord blood to cure diabetes. Mathis PT. Does it say the years it starts the blood collection database stuff in the articles, Casey? Yeah, this started in the 1960s. And they've been keeping these databases of all your genetic information stored in these warehouses. I don't know where they're storing this stuff. That's really creepy. There's Sabine. Thanks, Sabine. So if you're starting to feel some kind of, something in your life where things just aren't right, I'm not saying not to trust anyone, but you really need to vet the people that are coming in and out of your life. And there could be, until you understand the great controversy, until you understand good and evil and the bloodlines, then none of this becomes real to you. But make no mistake, the Bible makes a lot of promises about the saints in the last days, that they will have an effect in fighting the enemy. The enemy has not changed. Since the beginning of time, he's tried to wipe out God's seed. This is why the Israelites had to battle in the wilderness for 40 years against the Canaanites. They were trying to wipe them out. And so this stuff is real, and it's no different today. It's why Noah was under threat. They wanted to wipe him out till he got on the ark. It's why the Hebrews in Egypt, the Israelites, they were almost wiped out by the Egyptian pharaohs under oppression. You see, God said, "Let my people go." It's no different today, you guys. No different today. Yeah, now the state requires genetic testing for tests that parents don't want to know every time, and they can't say no. Yeah, they're giving you tests you don't even want to know. And as soon as that blood leaves your child, bruised in the heel, right? They know everything about your child. Now, what can we do about this? I don't know what you can do. I don't know the safety component of this. How safe is it not to have your child tested? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, you guys. Sister C, true guy. There's Christy H. Much love, Christy. Thank you. Quit with the Lie says the Book of Jasher. Yeah, bruise the heel. It's huge. Like I think it's all symbolic. They're bruising the woman in the heel, the child of the woman, right? They like to do this sorcery on us and these word games and wordplay. So, what do you do? Well, I guess you could demand that your genetic information is destroyed after your child is tested. You could start that dialogue. You could even, if you're pregnant right now, or you could even talk to your doctor and say, look, these are my concerns. I want my child tested for these things, but I want to have proof that that genetic testing has been destroyed after we've determined that my baby's healthy. That's what you can do. You don't want your child's genetic information sitting in some database that can be used as experiments, as we just demonstrated earlier in the show. They are using your child's genetic information for experiments. They have been busted several times doing it without the parents' consent. What kind of experiments are they doing? That is the question. So, back in the chat, what did Trisha say? She said they threatened me that my child has to be seen in the office within 3 days after birth. State law. Wow, unbelievable. Sabine said something that's intense. Says Ozaru. Ozaru's in the mod seat. Thanks for popping off, you guys. Maybe the sighted woman on Wiki would be a good place to start. Yeah, that's probably a really good idea. Oh, she's got a Wiki page here. Let's see here. Bioethics. See, they talk about bioethics. They have no ethics. It's like what do they call it? Jumbo shrimp. Makes no sense. What is bioethics? The minute you took my information, the ethics went out the window. No such thing as bioethics. What was her name? Let's see. Oh, we're down here. Maybe, actually, I think it's in this article. I'm just sick and tired of getting pushed around, you guys. And I know you are too. And this is one more example of how we've lost our rights. Where did she go? Where'd that lady go? Advocacy groups. Maybe it's in this one here. Nope. Was it in this one? So, I think it was in this one. We'll find that later, you guys. Maybe we'll do a follow-up show. Okay, back in the chat. Yep, they threaten you with CPS, also with the vaccinations, of course. It is mandatory now in California. I think Hawaii too, and they're going to roll this out to all the rest of the states through gradualism. Eventually, they will roll it out to the rest of the states. Probably have a couple false flag events where some outbreaks happen, and they say, "Oh, it's because these parents didn't have their kids vaccinated, and they're to blame. And if you don't comply, we're going to put you in a FEMA camp." All right. Yeah, it's pretty nuts, right, man? This. Yeah, you have no choice in California. I'm glad my kids are grown. I don't have to worry about this stuff. DSHS, Department of Homeland Security, DNA deception, Texas Tribune. When they were sued last year for storing baby blood samples without parental consent, Texas health officials said they'd done it for medical research. They never said they turned over the blood spots to the federal government to help build a vast DNA database. So here it is, right here. Texas Tribune review of 9 years worth of emails and internal documents on the Department of State Health Services newborn blood screening program, released after the state settled the case so quickly that it never reached the discovery phase, shows an effort to limit the public's knowledge of the program. So here we have a secret program. This broke in February 22nd, 2010, when the state health officials were sued last year for storing infant blood samples without parent consent. They said it was for the medical research into birth defects, childhood cancer, and environmental toxins. That's interesting because when you do, this was, let's see, where was this? This was in Texas. They said they never said they were turning over hundreds of dried blood samples to the federal government to help build a vast DNA database, a forensics tool designed to identify missing persons and crack cold cases. A Texas Tribune review of 9 years' worth of emails and internal documents on the Department of State Health Services newborn blood screening program reveals the transfer of hundreds of infant blood spots to an armed forces lab to build a national and someday international mitochondrial DNA registry. This should be front page truth or news, you guys. The only way this is going to get out is if you share this video. The records released after the state agreed in December to destroy more than 5 million infant blood spots also shows an effort to limit the public's knowledge of aspects of the newborn blood program. So they were trying to do a cover-up, and they were trying to manage the debate around it. But the plaintiffs who filed the lawsuit never saw them because the state settled the case so quickly that it never reached the discovery phase. During the discovery phase of the trials, you guys, that is when the gloves come off and everything is revealed. They did not want it to go to the discovery phase because all this would have been public knowledge. DSHS spokeswoman Carrie Williams said that while the department's general philosophy was to save blood spots for public health research, we did not have an exclusive policy. Okay, so do you remember during the show when we asked Twyla about the states working with the federal government? Well, here's a prime example of that happening. And who knows how many more were happening without our knowledge. She says DSHS participated in the project because officials believed it would help in missing persons cases. To me, that sounds like a cover story. And knew the blood spots could not be linked back to a particular individual. That's a lie. Our understanding of mtDNA is that it's not used to pinpoint exactly who a person is, but can help determine origins. Williams said, our intentions were good ones. But Jim Harrington, the civil rights attorney who filed the blood spot lawsuit last year on behalf of 5 Texas parents, believes the DSHS meant to deceive the public. When he was negotiating with state officials, he said he specifically asked what research the blood spots were being used for, and there was no mention of the federal project. He says he was stunned by how quickly the state settled the lawsuit. Sometimes there are slam dunk cases, but I'd never seen this kind of case settle without discovery, says Harrington, director of Texas Civil Rights Project. This explains the mystery of why they gave up so fast. For decades, the state has screened newborns for a variety of birth defects, breaking their heels and collecting 5 drops of blood on a paper card. Isn't it weird, the 5 drops? Wonder if that has any numerical significance. Until 2002, the cards were thrown out after a short storage period, but starting that year, the state health department began storing blood spots indefinitely for research into causes of selected diseases. 4 years later, DSHS began contracting with Texas A&M's University School of Rural Public Health to warehouse the cards, which were accumulating at a rate of $800,000 a year. State health officials never notified parents of the changes. They didn't need consent for the birth defecting screening, so they didn't ask for it for research purposes. The agency's rationale was that it let parents who asked opt out of the newborn blood screening and de-identified all the samples before shipping them off. De-identified the samples. Interesting. Over the last several years, researchers have requested Texas baby blood spots for a variety of medical projects. A variety of medical projects. Let me go back in the chat, make sure we're still connected here. This is simply unbelievable. To study the gene involved in clubfoot, to inspect the DNA of infants who develop childhood cancer, to examine prenatal lead exposure. Those are the projects state health officials have touted repeatedly before lawmakers and critics. But the least publicized of these research projects is arguably the most interesting. Here it is. Between 2003 and 2007, the state gave 800 de-identified blood samples to Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory to help create a national, let's look this up, Adult Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory. We'll research that after we're done with this article, you guys. In Wikipedia, let's see what this says. Just open up that tab and be ready. mtDNA is extremely valuable in forensics because it's easier to find. Do you see the inconsistencies in the story? They're saying that the blood samples were stored for missing persons, but then on the other hand, they're saying that they've been de-identified. So what use are they for missing persons if they've been de-identified? You see, mtDNA is extremely valuable in forensics because it's easier to find and extract from human cells than nuclear DNA. MT stands for mitochondrial. In addition to blood, it can be identified in hair, bones, teeth, and damaged or degraded biological samples, and can be used to identify victims of mass disasters or to solve long since cold criminal cases, but it's only as valuable as its sample size. Armed Forces Identification Laboratory scientists, in conjunction with the research branch of the Justice Department, approached Texas in a $1.9 million effort to expand the country's database, the DNA database, part of the president's DNA initiative launched under George Bush. I told you guys that Texas was at the crosshairs of much of what is manifesting now in this reality. Texas is in the crosshairs. This is another example. We had Roe v. Wade passed in Texas. We had the first case of Ebola in American soil in Texas. We have this secret government research project into your children's DNA in Texas. What is it about Texas? What is going on? We will get to the bottom of it, you guys. Wanted anonymous and maternally unrelated blood samples from Texas Caucasians, African Americans, and Asians, and from Hispanics and Native Americans in particular. Hispanic and Native Americans in particular. What kind of Nazi experiments were these people doing in the military? Why does the military have our children's DNA? It says to round out their genetic record. Why do they have to have a genetic record? Why does the military have to have a genetic record? Yeah, I hope you guys are understanding the severity of what's going on here. This is huge, okay? Researchers also took samples from prison populations and infant blood screening in other states, including Florida, Minnesota, and California. They did not pay Texas for the samples. Eventually, research proposals indicate federal officials hope to be able to share this data worldwide. For international law enforcement and investigation in the context of homeland security and anti-terrorism efforts. This is what they're saying as to why they did this. International law enforcement investigation in context of homeland security and anti-terrorism efforts. What was it? Black children, or was it African American children. What are they trying to wage some kind of genocide on certain groups based on these blood samples? Like, what is this about? Whether Texas officials were concerned about the perception of the project or simply didn't think it was newsworthy, they never mentioned it. In presentations and public reports and emails sent to reporters as recently as last year, state health officials never brought up the federal project, even when they discussed the merits of roughly 24 medical research projects designed to unlock the causes of childhood disorders like autism and diabetes. In November, when Texas Tribune first filed an open records request with the DSHS to review blood spot records, the agency said the information requested was confidential. 2 weeks later, when the lawsuit settlement was formally signed, the Tribune asked again, and this time the agency relented. But the box of documents officials turned over hardly referenced the mtDNA project. Hardly referenced it at all. Aside from a single email referencing a U.S. Department of Justice, National Institute of Justice and Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory. When the Tribune pressed health officials about the missing research files, they produced them. So they tried to give them the information without giving them the stuff that mattered. They let one slip by, which tipped them off. They asked for the additional files, and they received them. They said it was an oversight. The documents had been overlooked in their initial search. The records the agency initially released paint a portrait of an agency that walked on eggshells around the baby blood spot collection. From 2001, when lawmakers first debated whether to warehouse the cards, through last year, when they passed a law in response to the civil rights lawsuit, giving parents better options to opt out. Unbelievable. I'll continue to dig in here. I don't want to read this whole article and beat you guys to death with it. Let me put the link in the description or in the chat. If you guys have additional questions, you can look and reference that article. Everybody, please hit the thumbs up button on this. This is probably one of our best shows in terms of information and exposing the enemy for what they do. The world needs to see this. Tweet it, share it, do everything that you can. This is the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory. Let's look at Wikipedia and see what this is all about. Laboratory specializing in DNA profiling. Okay, so they're doing DNA profiling, the federal government, using American citizens for terrorism. What are they calling terrorism? Is this about profiling someone based on our bloodlines? They're pretty much saying that, you guys. They're identifying homegrown terrorists based on our bloodlines. That's what they're saying here. Otherwise, they wouldn't be collecting DNA from Caucasian, Asian, and Black and Native American children of America. We're not terrorists, but this is what they're saying. There's something in the blood. And maybe we all awaken to it at a certain point in our lives, realize our potential, and this is what they're afraid of. It says here, it appears to be part of the United States Army Medical Research and Material Command. They store refrigerated DNA samples from all current active duty and reserve personnel. So once you join the military, they get your DNA. However, almost all casualty identifications are affected using fingerprints for military ID card records. So the cover for this organization is that they're storing the DNA to identify dead soldiers, right? But we just saw an example of them receiving regular citizens' DNA from Texas. Okay, that had nothing to do with the military. So we have caught them in another lie. Cover story, truth.